"Jamie, take a look at this," Marcus exclaimed. We had just returned to Marcus's apartment, and he was already reviewing the footage from our live stream. Somehow, I'd let him convince me to document our investigation, though what began as casual curiosity had evolved into something deeply personal. The stream had generated significant engagement, with his viewer count skyrocketing. People are drawn to mysteries, it seems. The footage he captured would certainly keep his audience engaged. While we were both physically exhausted from our recent excursion, we escaped without serious injuries. Emotionally, however, old wounds had been reopened and would take time to heal, a process that couldn't truly begin while questions remained unanswered. The last time I shared my story, I mentioned a noise outside my apartment that had startled me. My heart had raced, but it turned out to be just a stray dog knocking over my recycling bin. An anticlimactic end to a terrifying evening. Marcus and I had initially planned to return to Blackwater Park that night, but my sprained ankle convinced us that venturing back to a place where we might need to flee quickly wasn't wise. Instead, I developed an alternative approach. I doubted the police would take my account seriously, but even if they did, they were unlikely to share any findings with me. While the idea of infiltrating what I'd come to think of as a nest of horrors seemed insane, my primary goal since that fateful night was to investigate the abandoned recreation center and its indoor pool. I needed to search for clues about my friend's disappearance. After my encounter with those creatures, I was almost certain that whatever happened to Ryan involved them. So I began researching. First, I wanted to understand why the recreation center with its natatorium had closed. Despite being a popular community hub in its prime, 8 years ago the facility began experiencing problems maintaining proper chemical levels in the pool. Swimmers reported skin irritation and chemical burns after using the facility. After an inspection by municipal authorities, the pool was deemed unsafe and closed to the public. Municipal recreational facilities are typically maintained by local government, and often routine upkeep falls by the wayside. It wasn't financially viable to continue operations. Further research revealed this was a common pattern nationwide. Facilities are used until they become unusable, then demolished. However, due to budget constraints in our city, the building remained standing 8 years later, awaiting demolition that never came. There was also an environmental factor contributing to the closure. The inspection had revealed dangerously low pH levels in the water, highly acidic conditions that explained the reported symptoms. This contaminated runoff was apparently damaging the local ecosystem in the Blackwater Preserve. I wasn't familiar with this specific area, as during my ill-fated walk weeks ago, I hadn't noticed anything resembling environmental damage near the drainage tunnel. This suggested multiple drainage systems were in place. There seemed to be a connection between those deformed entities and the acidic water, though I couldn't find concrete evidence. I filed this information away as I continued my investigation. Next, I delved into disappearances in the area. Over the past 8 years, more than 150 people had gone missing, an alarming figure that made me question our local police department's effectiveness. I decided to call and speak with a detective about these concerning statistics, using my inquiry about Ryan as a pretext. They had the audacity to claim there were no active missing persons cases, as if closing an investigation was equivalent to resolving it. After ending the call, I felt more disillusioned than ever. I committed myself to uncovering the truth independently, with Marcus's assistance. Speaking of Marcus, he was making progress on his end. Marcus had visited the park early one morning to set up several trail cameras. One aimed at the recreation center, another concealed beneath the wooden observation deck overlooking the preserve, and a third directed toward the drainage tunnel where I first encountered the entities. This allowed him to monitor the area when he had time to review the footage. He eventually captured images of the creatures, particularly around the drainage tunnel. Interestingly, the camera beneath the deck recorded more movement than anticipated. I had initially theorized that they inhabited the recreation center, but the footage showed them primarily moving away from it. Remember when I mentioned the pathway fork? I had taken the left path toward the drainage area, but whatever lay down the right path remained unknown. Nevertheless, we determined that the recreation center might not be their primary dwelling, but rather a transit point. After observing their activity for a week, We decided we needed a name for them. We settled on crawlers. By this point, my ankle had nearly healed. Another week and it would be fully functional. We used this time to finalize preparations and confront some difficult questions. Our plan was to enter the park before sunrise, make noise outside the recreation center as dawn approached to flush out any crawlers inside, and if it seemed safe, enter the building via the drainage tunnel. Once inside, we would search for clues, straightforward enough. But we had overlooked a crucial consideration. What if we encountered the crawlers? We agreed we would attempt to defend ourselves and escape, but were unsure if we could bring ourselves to kill one unless absolutely necessary. Despite their nightmarish appearance and likely violent history, we didn't feel entitled to act as executioners. For this reason, rather than knives or firearms, we opted for non-lethal defensive weapons. Baseball bats seemed unwieldy, so we each purchased an expandable baton from the local tactical supply store. We packed backpacks with essential gear: flashlights, portable phone chargers, extra clothing, food, water, first aid supplies, and more. I even brought my old two-way radios in case we needed to separate. We also discussed escape strategies. Marcus suggested we each drive our own vehicles, in case the worst happened and only one of us made it out. I began to reassure him that we'd be fine, but remembered my harrowing experience and agreed. The day before our expedition, we met at his apartment. He was eager to stream the entire investigation and was preparing his audience for the next morning's content. In a way, I welcomed this documentation. No one would believe us based solely on our testimony and grainy camera footage. At least this way, whatever we discovered would reach the public. He signed off from his stream, and we performed a final equipment check before retiring for the night. Though it was only 10 p.m., we planned to wake at 4 a.m. I lay awake, anxious about what awaited us, struggling to fall asleep until exhaustion finally overtook me. The harsh alarm yanked me from restless slumber. I brewed coffee for Marcus and myself, then roused him. While he ensured his recording equipment was properly configured, we reviewed our plan once more before getting dressed. He followed in his car as we drove to Blackwater Park, arriving around 4:45 a.m. Surprisingly and concerning, another vehicle was already parked there. Scanning the area, we determined that whoever had arrived before us wasn't using the courts. Most likely a jogger or early morning hiker. We agreed to proceed as planned but remain vigilant for this other visitor, warning them away if necessary. We had parked as close to the recreation center as possible, so before unloading our gear, we approached the building. I watched the front entrance while Marcus circled to the side, where metal fixtures would create louder sounds to reverberate inside. As he began banging, my mind flashed back to that night when I heard the creatures within. After 10 minutes of intermittent noise, we were satisfied that no one, or nothing, was responding from inside. At least, nothing that revealed itself. We collected our packs and headed toward the trailhead. We proceeded at a leisurely pace, taking our time and reminiscing. Marcus for the first time in years, me for the second time in recent weeks. We discussed the good and bad memories we shared here as teenagers. This conversation was likely more for Marcus's audience than ourselves, but it helped distract us from what lay ahead. As we approached the trail leading to the observation deck, I suggested we complete a full circuit to ensure no crawlers were nearby. I also wanted to locate whoever else was in the park to ensure their safety. We took the path that led to the exit near the basketball courts. From this vantage point, we could observe the entire front of the park without being seen. We noticed the other vehicle was gone, which prompted us to take a short break to eat, drink, and mentally prepare before heading deeper into the preserve. When we reached the observation platform, it was only 5:30 a.m. Darkness still enveloped the park, with sunlight just beginning to filter through the trees. I was confident we would have ample daylight for our mission, yet a nagging sensation warned me not to become complacent. We lingered on the platform, overlooking the forest until enough light revealed the path below. I cautioned Marcus about the treacherous descent, but the ground was dry today, allowing us to navigate to the base without significant difficulty. At the bottom, we paused at the fork in the trail. Our plan was to access the recreation center through the drainage tunnel. So far, we'd seen no signs of the crawlers, not even on the trail cameras Marcus had positioned. He retrieved an additional camera, and we ventured a short distance down the right trail. Seeing nothing unusual ahead, we continued approximately 100 yards before finding a suitable placement for the camera. Marcus concealed it within a hollow log beside the path, aimed further down the trail. Hopefully, this would alert us to anyone approaching while we investigated. We returned to the fork and headed toward the drainage system. We began noticing scattered trash identical to what I'd seen before, and after a few minutes, I discovered the shirt bearing Ryan's name. Showing it to Marcus, he appeared distant, the reality of our situation finally sinking in. Simultaneously, we turned toward the drainage tunnel. It was time. We carefully descended the rocky embankment and paused at the entrance. Marcus had all 3 camera feeds open on his phone by now, and I activated my flashlight. I touched the batten at my hip, confirming its presence. Then we entered the tunnel. Barely 10 feet inside, we were assaulted by a sulfurous stench. The odor was revolting, but I recalled reading that highly acidic water often produces such smells. The environmental authorities were justified in closing this facility. We continued forward, enduring the stench and Marcus's constant gagging. The tension was palpable. I kept my light directed ahead while Marcus monitored our rear. We had been walking steadily for about 15 minutes when Marcus signaled me to stop. He displayed his phone screen, showing that the camera facing the recreation center had detected movement. At the edge of the frame, we clearly observed something briefly enter and exit view. Panic immediately threatened to overwhelm me, but I suppressed it. We had come for a purpose, and the sooner we reached the recreation center, the sooner we could determine our next move. Reckless as it seemed, Marcus agreed we were too committed to retreat. While it might have been debris blown by wind, I knew better. We proceeded, albeit at an accelerated pace. Barely 5 minutes later, the tunnel bent sharply upward. We had been walking a gradual incline throughout, subtle but noticeable. Our lights revealed a grate overhead, with an aluminum ladder affixed to the wall leading up. We advanced cautiously, with me in the lead. As I dislodged the grate, I heard something I hadn't anticipated despite the fear that had gripped me throughout this journey. Someone was screaming. I hurriedly replaced the grate and nearly tumbled onto Marcus as we retreated down the ladder. Yet before we could react further, I heard what seemed to be sighs of relief. I hesitated, then climbed back up the ladder, Marcus giving me a bewildered look. The screaming resumed immediately as I lifted the grate, interspersed with hysterical sobbing. I quickly pulled myself through and found myself at the bottom of one of the former Olympic-sized pools. I swept my light around, attempting to locate the source of the distress while Marcus emerged behind me. Striving to remain composed despite the blood-curdling screams, I searched for a way out of the pool. Marcus discovered steps to our right, so we cautiously ascended, continuously scanning with our lights. The interior was nearly pitch black even during daylight. The building was massive, without electricity and with few windows. Essentially, visibility was severely limited. However, I pinpointed the apparent source of the sound and navigated toward what appeared to be a staff office. Just outside the door, the screaming diminished to whimpers. "Hello," I called out. "We're not one of those things. Are you okay?" "Hello? Help me," a woman responded. She was restrained in the corner of the room, bound to something bolted to the floor. In the darkness, I couldn't identify what. As I retrieved my pocket knife to cut her free, she began screaming hysterically again. As she did, I looked toward Marcus, who was illuminating the area for me. Behind him stood a silhouette, humanoid, emaciated, grotesque. Marcus reacted too slowly. The crawler slammed him headfirst into the concrete wall. My attention fixed on his motionless form sprawled across the floor, unconscious. The crawler then turned toward me, but before it could react, I struck its forehead with my baton. Collapsed, and I slammed the door shut, rushing to check on Marcus and the woman. I freed her first, then enlisted her help with Marcus. Examining his injury, he was bleeding from the impact, but not profusely. While he remained unconscious, I questioned the woman about her circumstances. Her name was Sophie. She was terrified of these creatures who had apparently abducted her during her morning jog. I recalled the vehicle that had disappeared before our infiltration, and she confirmed the crawlers had taken her keys. This complicated matters significantly. It seemed the crawlers could operate vehicles. Perhaps that explained how they'd evaded detection for so long. There must be a nearby location, at least within walking distance, where they abandoned the vehicles. Marcus began regaining consciousness as we heard pounding and growling from beyond the door. I wasn't particularly concerned about a breach. This was a steel door, secured from our side. However, we had no alternative exit from this room. Marcus remained disoriented but was quickly recovering. Sophie had calmed somewhat as well. Meanwhile, I listened, attempting to determine how many crawlers were outside. The distant rumble of thunder was distracting, but we all agreed it sounded like 2 or 3 immediately outside. Marcus and I knew we had detected movement on the trail camera midway through the drainage tunnel, suggesting more could be approaching. Our situation would deteriorate rapidly if that proved true, necessitating immediate action. Marcus instructed Sophie to position herself beside the door, concealed behind it when opened inward. We flung it open and confronted living nightmares. This was Marcus's first close encounter with the creatures, and his adrenaline-fueled scream chilled me to the bone. We swung our batons frantically, kicking as well, anything to clear our path. The crawler I had struck earlier was stirring again, but between Marcus and myself with our weapons, we incapacitated all 3 within minutes. We dragged them into the room we had just vacated, then barricaded the door to delay their pursuit. We needed to act quickly, so the 3 of us began searching for another escape route. According to my research, at least 1 additional drainage system should exist. Frantically, we realized the darkness made locating another exit nearly impossible, so we decided to return to the Olympic pool drain we had used to enter. The prospect wasn't appealing, but what alternatives remained? Just as we committed to this plan, Marcus shouted that something was emerging from the drain. Before we could react, I was tackled by a crawler that must have been hiding within the building. Its hands closed around my throat in a death grip. I could see the hatred in its face, as if my existence was an abomination. Peripherally, I saw Sophie violently thrown to the floor by another crawler that had climbed from the drain. I heard Marcus struggling behind me as a second crawler pinned my legs. Fighting for leverage, I writhed desperately to escape the chokehold. Darkness began encroaching on my vision, the edges blurring. I couldn't dislodge the crawler from my legs, nor summon the strength to escape the other's grip. Fortunately, Marcus must have noticed my predicament, as he delivered a powerful kick to one crawler's face, allowing me to shake off the other. Both immediately lunged at me again, and the 3 of us toppled backward into a smaller pool, approximately 10 feet deep. This was dire, except we didn't strike the bottom. We landed on something solid but irregular. Survival instinct took over, leaving no time to investigate what had broken our fall. Sophie helped pull me out while Marcus swung indiscriminately at the crawlers. They made easy targets in the confined space. Marcus knocked one unconscious with his baton, while Sophie had located a concrete block which she dropped onto the other's head. Both appeared incapacitated. We seized this opportunity to resume our search for an exit. As we swept our lights around, I briefly illuminated the smaller pool we had just escaped. My gaze snapped back immediately, and I observed with mounting horror that the pool was filled nearly to capacity with bones. Human bones. Something fractured within my mind. All those years wondering what had happened to Ryan. Finding the torn shirt. Encountering the crawlers in all their malevolence. Ultimately, his remains likely rested in this grotesque repository. The 3 of us stood stunned for several minutes before Sophie jarred us back to reality. We needed to escape immediately. Since our encounter with the last pair, we hadn't detected or heard additional crawlers. Marcus checked the cameras again with no new movement visible. This was our window of opportunity. We abandoned further investigation of the building, located the drainage tunnel, and began our retreat. Sophie remained terrified, so Marcus led the way this time, with me following behind and Sophie between us. We moved as rapidly as possible, praying for an unobstructed path. As we approached the exit, Marcus noted the darkness outside. Emerging from the tunnel, we discovered it had been raining heavily for at least an hour. We immediately guided Sophie to the base of the steep incline beneath the wooden observation platform. We all attempted multiple times to scale the slope, but the mud prevented secure footing. I cursed our failure to bring climbing equipment. We needed an alternative route. We determined our only option was to follow the right fork of the path, where we had positioned the final camera. Though remaining vigilant, we began to feel marginally more secure. Sophie inquired why we had come prepared for confrontation at the recreation center. I explained my experience weeks earlier and our search for answers regarding our missing friend. I mentioned our reluctance to involve law enforcement given their demonstrated unreliability. She acknowledged hearing about numerous disappearances in the area but never imagined becoming a victim herself. Now united in our predicament, we were determined to escape together. As we progressed along the barely visible trail, I monitored our position via GPS. This path was leading us deeper into the Blackwater Preserve. We needed to find a gentler slope to ascend to the elevation of the nature trails. However, we were surrounded by untamed wilderness. At each bend, Marcus scouted ahead. He continued interacting with his streaming audience, a coping mechanism I suspected. We had endured a nightmare, and it was barely midday. After 30 minutes, we encountered another fork. According to GPS, continuing straight would lead us further from civilization, so we veered right. This generally oriented us back toward the preserve, but a sense of foreboding descended upon me as I recalled the crawlers we had left behind. Surely they would pursue us soon. The rainfall intensified, droplets exploding into expanding puddles around us. The reduced visibility might benefit us, but would also mask sounds of approach. We maintained a brisk pace and, after more than an hour, found an exit of sorts. We emerged from the woods facing an open field. Further back, numerous vehicles were arranged in rows extending into the distance. We had discovered the crawler's vehicle repository. Sophie confirmed this when she identified her car among them. Beyond the impromptu lot, we spotted a dirt road. We decided to risk investigation. Crouching low, we approached the only structure on the property. Sophie burst inside upon seeing an elderly man with gray-streaked hair watching television at a counter. Before I could intervene, she was hysterically pleading for police assistance. The man appeared concerned, but his movements aroused my suspicion. As he nodded sympathetically, I noticed his hand reaching beneath the counter. Before I could react, he produced a firearm aimed directly at me. Sophie and I froze. "I can't allow you to leave. You should never have returned." He directed the latter statement at me. "What's happening here?" I demanded. "That's not your concern. The creatures and I have an arrangement. They provide valuables they acquire, and I maintain silence. They conduct their activities undisturbed." "But what are they?" pleaded. "I'm uncertain. Cannibals, certainly. As for the deformities, unknown. It's irrelevant now, though." Marcus had silently approached from behind and struck the man with his baton, rendering him unconscious. Despite momentary consideration of more severe action after what I'd heard, rationality prevailed. We searched his pockets and discovered keys. Quickly determining that the aged truck parked nearby was his, we climbed in and accelerated toward the dirt road behind the property. After 20 minutes, we encountered foliage blocking the path but simply drove through, emerging onto a gravel road. Checking my phone, we were approximately 10 miles from Blackwater Park's entrance. After navigating several unmarked dirt and gravel roads, we reached the main road where the park entrance was located. I instructed Sophie to drop us at our vehicles, then take the truck to the police station. She agreed, and as she departed, she embraced us both tearfully. Uncertain whether we wanted police involvement, I requested that Sophie withhold our identities. She promised discretion while reporting the rest of her horrifying experience. After parting, Marcus and I reconvened at his apartment. Chain-smoking throughout the drive, I gradually relaxed and reflected on the day's revelations. Ryan was most likely deceased, his remains in the recreation center. A community of deformed cannibals inhabited the Blackwater Preserve. At least one ordinary person assisted their predation on innocent victims. I had sought answers and found them, yet questions remained. Upon arriving at Marcus's, we reviewed everything while sharing a bottle of whiskey. Marcus began checking his stream and engaging with viewers, assuring them this wasn't fabricated content. I wished it had been fictional, but his audience was captivated regardless. I began questioning whether sending Sophie alone to the police station was wise. She was traumatized, and having support while explaining her ordeal would have been beneficial. I resolved to visit the station the following day to corroborate her account. The authorities absolutely needed to investigate that building. As I contemplated next steps, Marcus interrupted my thoughts. He displayed the live feed from the drainage tunnel trail camera. A crawler stood motionless, staring directly into the lens. It made a gesture that shook me profoundly. Only 2 other people knew my personal hand signal, and one of them was missing.